It's so funny, these virtual presentations. As soon as Kunal left, my headphones, everything changed because there was no more sound from Kunal. So now I'm really speaking into the abyss. I love the chat because it helps remind me that there are people on the other side of this screen. I do have my dog with me. His name is Fitz. He may chime in from time to time, hopefully not. But you may hear a dog bark at some point. That's the nature of the work from home life. Very cool. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so we have customers who use it for templated content. Nice. Lisa, yes, maybe Fitz will make an appearance. Sometimes he likes to jump up on the sofa and get some FaceTime as well. He's a pretty sharp looking animal. Lisa, are you also a dog parent? You guys can also follow me on Twitter. I've just dropped my Twitter and my LinkedIn handle into the chat if you guys want to find some content for anything about brand marketing, localization, and translation. Kelly says, let's meet the puppy. All right, let's get Fitz up here. Come on, bud. The people want to meet you. He's making his way over. He's hobbling around a little today. There he is. You know what? I'll make this easy. We have another minute or two. So here he is, getting ready for the presentation. Chris, I think this is officially the most important piece of content that you've got from the day. Chris over at Notch. Yeah, Fitz is he's a border collie mutt that I adopted in the New Orleans area about, I think, 7 or 8 years ago now, and he's a great animal. I used to live in New Orleans. I'm from New York, but born and raised in New York, but I lived in New Orleans for 4 years after college to do some Katrina recovery work, which was a pretty meaningful time of my life. But now I'm in New York City, back from where I'm from, and I work for a company called Smartling, and we do language translation management. And it's a really important topic, especially now because content is so important. So today I've got a talk for you. It's called Content in the 2020s. I'm really excited to jump into it. Let me know your questions as we go. Feel free to chat with me here. I'll try and answer questions, but yeah, let's dive in. I really love data. I think some people in the room may be really excited about marketing data. Marketing data is pretty cool, but I like data from Star Trek. Are you guys Star Trek fans? I love data because he really is this, like, he's the example of artificial intelligence that I like to think about. You know, there's a lot of talk today about artificial intelligence and software and how it's helping make our lives better. It doesn't matter really what industry you're in, or if you're marketing to businesses or consumers. AI is a big part of the talk track now, but data is the real definition of artificial intelligence in my book, because he's this unbelievable character in Star Trek. I see some of you are Trekkies. He's this great character who knows the answer to every question, except he does not have the ability to feel. He has no emotional capacity. And I'm here to tell you today that I actually think that brands can create stories about their own technology companies by focusing on people. Really, it doesn't have to be a technology company, by the way. It could be any business-to-business brand can tell a story by focusing on people. And there he is. Fitz agrees. I feel this way because a lot of businesses have been doing this for a long time. They may be more consumer brands like Apple, but every single brand can connect with people on a human level. And I think we're learning this more and more this year. If you guys go to smartling.com and put in pound 2020, you can download this presentation, and I'll also email you a free guide about this exact topic. So you can take some notes now, but you can also get some notes later. What I find particularly interesting about how things are changing is that before, let's say, before the iPhone in particular, before the internet age, content was nowhere near as important as the product, folks. Here's a great example. This is a 1981 Sony Walkman. And when this thing came out, all people cared about was this product. But the company, Sony itself, they clearly didn't care too much about the content, because this is the original user manual for that Sony Walkman. And for those of you who are looking at this presentation from within the United States, you're going to notice something. You can't read this user manual. So the content that came along with the product didn't have the same value as the product itself. I'm going to show you a couple more examples. You used to buy a car. It was totally analog. By the way, Lisa, my dad kept this in a plastic bag. You used to buy cars. They had a totally analog experience. When you went shopping, you'd walk into a store, you'd try on a coat. If it fit, you'd walk out. If it didn't, you'd also walk out, but you wouldn't have the coat with you. We're getting back to outdoor cycling, but for many of us, the cycling experience before was the open road and the wind in your hair, and you focused on the ride qualities of the bike. And of course, date night was, we went to Blockbuster, picked up a DVD or VHS. The experience was going to a physical location, picking out the movie. But things changed quite a bit with the digital transformation. And the biggest change that I measure is that now content is as important as the product itself. It's no longer a side note. It is integral to the experience. Let me share with you what I mean by that. You buy a car today and it's a completely digital experience that's powered by content. Have any of you guys been in a Tesla before? That big screen is so rich with content. You can discover music. You can navigate to charging stations. You can play video games. Like, it's a content experience inside of a car. When you go shopping for a coat, you are not only looking at pictures of the coat on models, but you're also looking at all of this rich text on the right side. We call it the romance copy. That's all content that helps to sell the product. Cycling now, at least for me, over the past 4 months, I've basically been on a trainer in my apartment, and I'm hooking my bike up to a virtual world called Zwift, where I can cycle through hundreds of miles of virtual roads. This also is a very rich content experiences, and there are words everywhere in this experience that help to enable my experience riding in this virtual world. And we're also now, we're all on the iPhone or an Android device, and we're using mobile apps to power our lives. I've been ordering groceries on Fresh Direct. Every single item that I order is a product, right? Like a carton of milk is the product. But the way that I buy that product is by reading words on this mobile app. And as you can see on the left side, Fresh Direct has so many words to power this user experience. Shop past items, help New York City's most vulnerable, fresh deals, today's top rated. And of course, as I search for products, I can find a lot of different things through the content experience. Same with my Shake Shack application. I can get a cheeseburger by walking over to Shake Shack, which is a couple blocks away, or I could pre-order my burger by engaging with this rich experience that they've shipped to my iPhone. Same thing is true for ordering ice cream on Uber Eats or listening to my favorite podcast. It's not just the product that's important now, it's also the content. And my last illustration of this is my favorite, because every single one of these companies is doing the exact same thing. They're streaming services. You interact with them in more or less the same exact fashion. Of course, they have different advantages from the technology standpoint, but the main differentiator here is the content. We go to Netflix to watch House of Cards. We go to Disney on July 3rd to watch Hamilton. And we go over to these different mediums to find the shows that we can relate to. That's all content. So how do you go about humanizing your brand and your content in this digital world? Well, I want to tell you a little story about how we did this at Smartling. At Smartling, we help companies to translate and localize their experiences. And from my position, which is marketing, I need to find ways to engage our prospects and our customers in our technology and language services experience. So I had the choice to focus on one of these 4 different personas, let's say. I could have focused on probably most of you guys on the call in my marketing. I could focus on the marketers. They're the people who produce content that we eventually translate. I could have also focused on developers. There may be a couple developers here, but developers are the one that connect content management systems and marketing automation technologies to Smartling. So I could have focused on marketing to that persona or demographic. I could also have focused on exploring the story of translators to help reveal the human side of what we do. Or I could also focus on the consumer or end user, the people who actually are the beneficiary of your product and ours. So let's say the end user of there are so many customers of a GoPro or of a Fitbit, right? Who's acquiring those products and those content in another language. The reality is that you could choose any of these, I think. But who would you profile if you were in my shoes? Would you focus your brand and content marketing on the marketer, the developer, the translator, or the end user? Drop A, B, C, or D into the chat. And as you do that, my point of view. So we have one for D, one for A, the marketer. Another one for D from Alicia. Nicole saying, let's go after the marketer. Love this. Thank you all for the feedback here. So my point of view on this is that you can actually focus on any of these personas you wish. You just need to know exactly why you're doing it. We chose option C. We chose to focus on the translator. E, all of the above. That's great, Jackie. We focused on the translator. And the reason why is because, as I illustrated, the relationship between content and product has significantly changed. And while many of you may be content creators, or you may work with content creators, we all know who those people are, but we actually don't really know who the translator is. And the translators are the people who power global user experiences. And in many cases, companies don't actually have a direct relationship with their translator. They typically go off to a language services provider, and then there's no communication with the translator. That's something that we do differently. We introduce you to your translator because for too long, they've been key players in your content experience, in your brand experience, that you don't know. That changed last year. In the third quarter of last year, we launched a campaign called Move the World with Words so that you could meet the people behind global commerce, the people who breathe life into your content in every single language, the people who move the world with words. Now, this content and brand experience that we created was, here's Fitz again, and here's the book. We materialized it in a beautiful, award-winning book that showcases the stories and lives of translators worldwide. We actually sent a photographer around the world. She met with 12 of our translators. She interviewed them. She learned about their personal lives and professional pursuits. And what's really exciting is kind of what you're seeing here. These translators are just like you and me. They have amazing hobbies. They have amazing passions. And by creating content about these translators, we were able to form a unique connection with our customer base because they also, some of them, many of them, actually they're very interested in the translation process, and they have an emotional connection to language translation. So we published the book. We launched 2 major events, one in London, one in New York, where we invited our customers for a full day of learning about language translation and how to improve the process. We actually invited the translators to speak at that event. This guy on the right is Daniel. He's also on the cover of our book. That's his dog, Bowie, man's best friend on the cover. And our customers absolutely loved it. We took out advertisements with the campaign. We're still running these. We bought billboards in New York City, and we put translators on billboards. It's crazy, right? But it was a really engaging experience where we built also an Instagram handle. So we extended the campaign digitally. And I'm sharing this story with you because I really believe in content and brand experiences. And I want to show you that this stuff actually works. We had a media goal, an earned media goal, and we achieved 104% of that goal, thanks in part to getting placement in Ad Age and Forbes. We had a pretty significant change to our website to adopt the content strategy and brand strategy that we introduced. And we had great results from that too. Our organic website traffic increased 11.4% month over month, just 1 month after introducing this campaign. And it resulted in a 50% increase in meetings booked by Drift quarter over quarter in the first quarter that this campaign was in the market. And our results trickled down through the funnel. Opportunities that included language services before we introduced this campaign. We have technology and we have language services. Before this campaign, only 20% of our opportunities included language services. It was just focused on technology. But after the campaign, now 80% of our opportunities include language services. And last quarter, we achieved 121% of our sales goal for language services. So all of this is to show you that if you create a content strategy that humanizes your brand, you can realize business results from it. And it's awfully important that you do that because every single person has an emotional side to them, and you can tap into that emotional state. For those of you who are Trekkies, I think it was season 6, Data got an emotional chip from his fellow characters on the show, and it gave Data the ability to feel. It gave him the ability to love, and that was really the only component of Data's character that he felt was missing, and that the audience wanted for Data. So I ask you today, what's your emotional chip? What can you use as an emotional chip to advance the content strategy for your brand? I've got 3 recommendations for you, 3 ways that you can do this brand by humanization exercise. First and foremost, you need to understand why you exist. You have to really dig deep with your team and get to the root cause of why you exist. Second, you need to say something different. A lot of brands out there talk about speeds and fees and efficiencies and throw data points out there, and you need that to some extent, but you also have an opportunity to say something different, at least in the headline, to attract people into your brand and your consumer experience. And lastly, if you translate your content, then people anywhere in the world can understand it. So don't forget to do that. That's my talk on content in the 2020s. I feel that now more than ever, we need to really invest in bringing some emotional emphasis into our content programs. I'm really glad you all showed up today for this talk. I'm happy to answer a couple of questions, but I'm also very grateful to Pros and Content for having me today. And yes, John, you're right. It didn't work out very well for Data, but it was a good exercise. The emotional chip turned out to be a little too much for him to handle. What do you all think? Are you going to look at injecting some emotion into your content? Does this resonate with you? I'd love to hear. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll be here for some questions. Lisa was asking what the budget was for the photographer. So we hired a photographer named Elizabeth Brentano. I found her on Instagram. She is a really great storyteller. I don't recall what what the complete budget was for her fees, but the beauty of today's world is that you can find somebody for any budget, whether it's going on Fiverr or finding someone on Instagram. This was obviously not an inexpensive campaign, but ballparking for her fees. Find me I honestly don't remember all of this, but it wasn't cheap. Like we had to produce a big book. We had to find an efficient way to do that. But I would say the entire project was less than 100K. Well, less than 100K. Taylor, thanks so much for joining. Jackie, I appreciate the feedback. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Very bland. Mary says very bland. Yes. Yeah. Dig deep and find something that will help to illuminate the humanity in what you do, because every single person that you work with adds value to your company and to your customers, and tell their story. It could be as simple as putting together some content about how people have been coping with working from home. What have they learned? There's so many great examples. Thank you for being here, Tanisha. Thank you, Emily. I appreciate that. Do I recommend the same approach for B2B companies? Yes, I absolutely do. I'm a B2B myself, and Petties to Fits. I think B2Bs are the biggest opportunity here, Catherine, to adopt a more consumer-like approach to marketing. We oftentimes feel like we need to get stiff with our content in particular. Loosen up. Talk like, when you write a B2B marketing email, write it as if you were trying to convince your best friend to have dinner with you. I'm sure that's a pretty easy text message to write. So use that same methodology in your email marketing, and I think people will respond differently. John asks a great question. How do you balance humanity in a more informal tone when communicating credibility? Great question, John. I think that it depends on what you're trying to market and what you're writing about. But at the end of the day, the people, the voices of your brand have to be authentic. I think what it comes down to is authenticity. As long as what you're saying, whether it's in a formal tone or an informal tone, as long as you're authentic, then you're going to be credible. If you inflate what you are communicating, then you will lose your credibility. So as long as you're authentic, I think you're going to be able to communicate informally or formally. What about translating movements and their statements? Found it very hard to translate Black Lives Matter. That's a very cool question, Erica. Some words you don't translate because they can stand on their own in English. So there are a lot of companies, a lot of brands that will not translate their content. I have a great example of that does not have to do with Black Lives Matter, but there's a company out there called AppQues, and they help customers to onboard their users. And they have a new feature. I'm forgetting the name of it. It's called slide outs. Slide outs does not exist in French. That word simply doesn't exist in French. So they have an option. They could change the name of the feature for French, or they can just leave it in English, and people will probably pick it up. So you as a content owner would have to work with a language services provider to make those recommendations, and there are ways to do that. How do you recommend that marketers think about saying something different? Where do you start? So Jackie, you start by understanding why you exist. That is the number one question for me when we started to launch this campaign, Move the World with Words. We spent a lot of time thinking about our customer base and the things that are important to them. And I don't know what industry you're in, but there are a lot of technologies out there now that allow you to play back calls with customers. But there are many ways to learn from your customers about what matters to them. And for years before I was on the marketing team, I was a customer success manager. So I spoke with customers regularly, and they told me that the translation process was really, really important to them. I also knew that we needed to advance our translation services business at the company. So I married these two ideas, and I worked with a couple of really creative people, and we figured out that move the world with words, these 5 words were actually a very powerful way of summarizing everything that we do, our technology and our services, into a small statement. So to summarize, start with understanding why you exist, and then try and match that with your business objectives. Thanks for the question. And Erica, thanks as well. Erica, if you go onto our Twitter, which is Smartling, @Smartling, you're going to see that we actually transcreated messaging around the events in the recent 2 weeks. We put out a statement, Together Against Racism, and we translated that into, I think, 4 or 5 different languages. And that will give you an example of how we approached localizing content related to Black Lives Matter. That project is called transcreation because you're trying to tell a story. You're trying to translate a phrase that has more weight to it than just the words themselves. It's really, there's a lot of meaning behind the phrase. So in order to get that right, you have to spend more time with a very well-trained translator who not only translates the content, so the words swap English to French or Japanese, but the meaning, the emphasis of the phrase is still captured. Thanks so much, Erica. Thanks everybody for joining. Fitz has gone to sleep. I guess he's bored, but you guys seem to still enjoy. Are there any other questions that I can discuss with you? Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I'm Adrian Cohn, and you can follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn @Adrian K. Cohn, and you can find me at smartling.com as well. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great day.